Most people will never know this, but the world is being positioned for the largest financial collapse in a century. Not by accident, not by natural cycles alone, but by those who quietly control the levers of money, markets, and power. They have been planning this for decades, moving billions, shifting assets, and quietly insulating themselves, while the rest of the world remains blind to the storm that is coming. Here's what they don't want you to see. Most people will never know this, because the headlines you see are designed to distract, reassure, and normalize chaos. They show optimism after crises, resilience after crashes, and headlines about minor market blips. They never showed the hidden mechanisms, the trillions parked in offshore accounts, the secret buying of land, farmland, and natural resources, the concentrated accumulation of gold, silver, and rare commodities. This is still happening today, and it is far more deliberate than anyone realizes. The history of financial collapse shows a pattern. In 1929, Wall Street crashed, but the richest families had already started hedging. They moved assets overseas. They shifted capital into private holdings. The Federal Reserve, still young, tightened credit, while banks failed. Most people will never know this, but the seeds of wealth preservation in the midst of chaos were planted nearly a century ago. In 2008, the global financial crisis repeated the story. Lehman Brothers collapsed, but the world's elite moved money into hedge funds, gold, and private equity. They didn't panic, they profited. This is still happening today, and the playbook has been studied, refined, and prepared for a repeat, far larger in scale. Let's trace the modern breakdown. In the 1970s, inflation surged. Oil shocks disrupted economies. Central banks learned to manipulate interest rates to favor institutional borrowers. Most people will never know this, but inflation is a hidden tax, redistributed to the powerful. In the 1980s, deregulation allowed banks and corporations unprecedented freedom. The 1990s saw the rise of derivative markets, complex financial instruments that concentrate risk for the many while allowing the few to hedge almost perfectly. By the early 2000s, the housing bubble and shadow banking systems created a fragile, global financial web. Each step in this evolution has been monitored and leveraged by elites. This is still happening today, and each policy, each financial innovation, is a thread in a far larger tapestry. Consider undeniable examples. BlackRock and Vanguard now control nearly 90% of the S&P 500 votes through passive investments. These are not small stakes. They represent influence over corporations, governance, and strategic decisions. Most people will never know this, but through such mechanisms, a handful of firms control the direction of global capitalism. Another example. Central banks' balance sheets now exceed trillions in assets. The Federal Reserve, European Central Bank, and Bank of Japan coordinate quietly, ensuring liquidity to save large institutions while ordinary citizens face rising costs. This is still happening today, and these systems are designed to shield elites from the very collapses they orchestrate. Look at commodities. Farmland, lithium, water rights, and energy assets are quietly being acquired by consortiums linked to billionaires. In 2020, during a global pandemic, these acquisitions accelerated. Most people will never know this, but every crisis has been an opportunity. Natural resources, previously dispersed among local communities, are being consolidated under elite control. This is still happening today, and as supply chains stressed under environmental and geopolitical pressures, control of these assets translates directly into power, influence, and wealth preservation. Historically, geopolitical tensions have also been leveraged. In 1913, the Federal Reserve was created, consolidating control over currency. In 1971, the gold standard was abandoned, giving central banks unlimited control over money printing. Most people will never know this, but each systemic change was designed to give financial elites greater leverage during crises. In modern times, trade wars, sanctions, and tariffs are not just political, they are financial instruments. This is still happening today, and they are deployed strategically to favor those positioned in alternative assets, foreign reserves, and commodities. Now, look directly at the 2025 to 2026 timeline. Central banks are experimenting with digital currencies, programmable money, and instant transaction monitoring. Governments quietly push legislation to control fiscal policy and financial behavior. Hedge funds, sovereign wealth funds, and elite family offices are accumulating precious metals and debt instruments at record levels. Most people will never know this, but by mid-2026, the first coordinated asset shifts will be complete. This is still happening today, and the stage is set for a controlled collapse, one that appears chaotic to the public, but entirely orchestrated behind the scenes. Major indicators are already visible. Global debt exceeds $300 trillion. Inflationary pressures are mounting in emerging and developed markets alike. Real estate bubbles are appearing in multiple nations simultaneously. Most people will never know this, but these are the cracks. The elite watch closely. They understand that panic is profit. When markets fail, the well-prepared don't lose. They gain influence, assets, and political leverage. This is still happening today, and the next collapse could surpass anything seen in 1929, 2008, or even 2020. Who wins? Banks with exposure hedged in multiple currencies, gold-backed holdings, and futures. Corporations owning critical infrastructure and technology. Sovereign funds with diversified global portfolios. Who loses? Small businesses, retirees, dependent on fixed incomes, ordinary citizens trapped in debt cycles. Most people will never know this, but every policy favoring digital money, high interest, lending, or ESG investment criteria ensures power and wealth remain concentrated. This is still happening today, and the coming years will determine whether society becomes more unequal or entirely subjugated to financial control. The signs are everywhere. Cybersecurity drills, financial stress tests, and emergency cashless programs are piloted quietly in multiple nations. Supply chain disruptions are increasingly framed as unavoidable crises, while corporations quietly consolidate. Most people will never know this, but the infrastructure for the collapse is being tested now. This is still happening today and once fully operational. The collapse will look like chaos to the unprepared, but it will be a masterclass in control for those positioned at the top. By late 2026, key milestones will include cross-border digital currency frameworks, CARBON and ESG-linked financial incentives, and centralized control over major banking networks. Most people will never know this, but the window to prepare is shrinking. Gold, silver, foreign assets, and strategic commodities will be critical. This is still happening today, and understanding the timing and mechanisms is essential for survival. The next decade will redefine wealth and power. Those who anticipate the collapse will not merely protect themselves, they will benefit, acquiring undervalued assets, controlling key resources, and gaining political leverage. Most people will never know this, but the greatest transfer of wealth in modern history is underway. This is still happening today. And when it occurs, it will be swift, comprehensive, and largely invisible to the masses, until it is too late. If this video woke you up, drop a like and subscribe. New forbidden truth every single day. Turn on notifications, the next one might save your wealth. Comment. The one thing you're doing right now to prepare. I read every single one.